New heights are constantly being reached in the world of virtual reality. A new device was recently invented with the name of Oculus Rift. The dream child of a 21-year-old gamer, the Oculus Rift takes the form of a pair of ski goggles. When you plug the goggles into a computer, you are immersed in a virtual world that goes on beyond your peripheral vision. If you turn your head, you see sights on either side, and if you look down, you see the body of your avatar, whose movements are controlled by a handheld game controller, which is perhaps the one aspect of the simulation that takes you out of the virtual world. But it's still the kind of invention that people have been dreaming about since before the movie The Matrix came out. So how can this invention be utilized? For this presentation, I'm going to look at the Oculus Rift as a new medium for the creation of art. Is this a strange idea? Well, if you look at the history of art, the creation of virtual worlds has been an aspect of art for a long time. For example, when you read a novel, you create a virtual world in your head. A recent study for the journal Psychological Sciences tracked participants' brain patterns while reading and found that the brain regions activated by performing an activity were activated just by reading about that activity. In visual art, paintings often take the viewer to new places. Films create worlds for us with their visual and auditory design, and then there are video games, which bring simulated reality to a new level because the viewer can make decisions that change the world around them, which makes the simulation much more real and much more impacting. With new virtual reality inventions like the Oculus Rift, worlds that were once written, painted, or filmed can become even more quote-unquote real. But not all art is concerned with creating a virtual world or mimicking the existing one. So in this presentation, I would like to address the knowledge issue question: to what extent is the value of art determined by the extent to which it is realistic or mimics reality? To answer this question, I will need to define the terms value, art, and reality. First off, value, when it comes to art, is incredibly subjective. Everyone seems to have their own valuometer. Personally, I think there are several aspects to art that make it valuable. A, its ability to elicit an emotional response. B, its ability to create knowledge that make its audience think, particularly in the case of concept pieces. C, the extent to which it engages its audience. And finally, D, how aesthetically pleasing or interesting it is. How important are value judgments in the area of art? The value of art is always, of course, subjective, as well as related to its monetary value. Value judgments in art are mainly made for the purpose of putting a price on a painting or piece. But there are other reasons why value judgments might be made. If, for example, art is trying to enact social change or persuade its audience to do something. Art will be defined, in this presentation, as a human presentation of skill or imagination, created with the intent of having value in one of the ways listed above. And last but not least, how to define reality. Technically, reality is the absolute and true existence of things, without being affected by human decisions, will, or awareness. However, if this is the case, can we ever know true reality? We are limited by our human form and knowledge. We are like the blind men in the parable of the blind man and the elephant. Each blind man approaches a different part of the elephant and feels it, and each declares that the elephant is similar to something else, like a column, a hose, and a rope, etc., because they cannot see the whole picture. And it will always be impossible for us to see true reality, since we only have one body and one life, unless you believe in reincarnation, that is. All we have to go by when it comes to reality is our own perception, and there are things that color that perception. All the ways of knowing, like language, emotion, perception, and reasoning, affect the way we see the world around us. Emotions, like anger or joy, can color the way that we see things. Associations and connotations shape the way we perceive reality, as do other languages, like body language and music, if we consider them languages. In movies, music is utilized to affect the audience's perception of the events they are witnessing. The same movie clip can mean something completely different if played with a different soundtrack. Music affects us emotionally, and these emotions, too, can affect our reality. Reason, on the other hand, and our rational minds help us to sort, categorize, and deduce, which creates another view of reality that might be completely different from our emotional idea of what's going on. A blind man's view of reality would be very different from someone with 20/20 vision. So, clearly, all of our perceptions of reality are completely different. Earlier, I was saying that it's impossible for us to see true reality because we only have one body and one life, and we see everything through our own perspective. We do, however, have the power to empathize, and one aspect of art is its ability to aid empathy. It makes it easier for us to know what it's like to walk in another person's shoes, and it can help us to see more of the elephant. In this way, the realism of a work of art would be considered inherently valuable because it aids us in seeing a bigger slice of reality. Perhaps good art mimics our perception of reality more so than actual reality, because what else do humans know? With the Oculus Rift, the viewer is given a world that goes beyond their own vision, which brings the medium closer to the way we actually see the world than any other artistic medium has before. It allows the viewer to be immersed more fully into the virtual world. But if art solely mimicked the way we see things, the way we see reality, depicting things as they appear to exist or have existed in the past, wouldn't it be very limited? So what about all the stylized, surrealistic, abstract, and exaggerated forms of art? The art that depicts our imaginings rather than our perception of reality. In these works of art, the concern is not with how realistic it is. In fact, it seems to be mainly Western culture that introduced the idea of mimicking reality with art in the Renaissance. In other parts of the world, art has been traditionally very stylized. In Islamic art, for example, beauty is found in the creation of geometric patterns rather than in depictions of humans or animals. In Japanese Noh theater, the movements of the actors are incredibly slow and stylized. In traditional Chinese art and calligraphy, beauty is found in the simplicity and in a few simple strokes of the brush. In the religious world, art can be seen as a way of honoring gods, and if this is the case, art doesn't need to be realistic, but perhaps divine, as a representation of something greater than this world and greater than mankind. In the world of literature, one might say that certain ways of writing are quote-unquote unrealistic. Shakespeare often wrote in a way that was very stylized and completely unlike the way in which people talk. Poetry is often unrealistic in this way, too, and it can feel contrived. However, it still has great value. In English class, we're studying the poetry of Emily Dickinson. Her poems are definitely not realistic. They do, however, have a connection to the way that we might perceive reality, and perhaps her form mimics the way that we think rather than the way that we see. In some way or another, many art forms that are unrealistic still ring true. Does that mean that an artwork's realism doesn't affect its value? I would still say that it does. The more quote-unquote real a work feels, it seems the more it might engage its. It is hard to say whether or not realism affects how aesthetically pleasing a work is. In fact, a truly realistic work would probably be less pleasing to the eye than an idealized one. But if the purpose of art is to make one think or to create knowledge, more realistic works grounded in reality are more likely to supply applicable and recognizable knowledge. There are, however, different types of knowledge. I'm assuming that art supplies propositional knowledge. Perhaps if we're considering virtual reality and video games art mediums, then perhaps procedural knowledge could also be gained through participating in a work of art. So what are the implications of this knowledge and these judgments? Personally, as an artist, I've grappled with these questions. Would it be best to do this piece in a realistic style? Would it be more effective or engage my audience more? Throughout this presentation, I was able to explore and answer some of these questions. Also, as a person living in a world of rapid technological advancement, I often wonder what these advancements mean for the world of traditional art. Will they make traditional art forms outdated? But that is what everyone thought would happen with painting when photography was invented, and it didn't. This seems to suggest that there is something more important in art than simply depicting subject matter in a realistic way, which is good news for traditional artists. In the meantime, experimentation in virtual reality will continue. There are still questions regarding its capabilities. Can art make someone feel emotion they have not felt in real life? Virtual reality is, of course, still a part of real life. But personally, I believe the ability art has to create knowledge of another's experience gives it the potential to foster empathy and understanding between people, and virtual reality could increase art's ability to give this kind of knowledge. If a simulation could make someone experience an emotion they have not felt in real life, virtual reality and the Oculus Rift could aid artists in the creation of highly valuable and deeply impacting worlds. Throughout this presentation, I've made the assumption that devices like the Oculus Rift can and would be used for artistic purposes. There are, however, many other possible applications in more practical, medical, technical, or scientific fields, as well as in education. Devices like these could be used to simulate historical events, and maybe even lead to historical discoveries. As we make our imaginings into realities, as in the case of the Oculus Rift, let us hope that the capabilities of these inventions will be used in valuable, innovative, and perhaps unexpected ways.